Redwood Grove Park lay hushed in the late afternoon light, its cracked pathways glowing beneath a sinking sun. On a weathered wooden bench, Harvey Sinclair sat nearly motionless, 72 years old, his once sturdy frame clad in a faded bomber jacket that bore a single bronze star. He inhaled slowly, each breath measured, his cloudy eyes reflecting battles fought long ago in dense Vietnamese jungles. Around him, the world moved on without him. Children's laughter danced on the breeze. Kites skipped across the sky, and joggers' footsteps echoed on distant trails. Yet mothers steered their strollers far from his bench, leaning close to whisper warnings into little ears. Their hushed voices seemed to replay in Harvey's mind, like a distant radio turning a quiet afternoon into a tense standoff. A curious girl paused mid-stride, her small face framed by wisps of auburn hair, and looked back at him with unguarded innocence. In her eyes, he saw a flash of recognition, an echo of comrades' faces as bullets tore through foliage, the same moment before a rifle cracked the silence. He held her gaze only for a heartbeat, then she ducked behind her mother's legs, and the moment was gone. The whispered caution, the sideways glances, Harvey knew them all too well. In uniform or in plain sight, a black man remained a target. Harvey closed his eyes and let the golden rays wash over his weathered face. For once, the sunlight asked no questions about race, no demands for ID or explanation, only warmth. In that fleeting instant, he felt himself slip free of the weight of suspicion and duty, just a man tasting simple peace. But he exhaled with the knowledge that this serenity, like so many truces, could shatter at any moment, and he braced himself for what would come next. A sudden crackle from a police radio cut through the afternoon calm, snapping Harvey Sinclair fully alert. He straightened almost imperceptibly, his old joints protesting as 3 officers closed in on him. Leading the trio was Officer Victor Fletcher, his expression unreadable beneath a creased cap. Beside him stood Ellis Mercer, shoulders taut, like coiled steel eyes flicking between Harvey and the path ahead. Bringing up the rear was Wesley Grant, firm grip on the leash of a massive German Shepherd Shadow, its black muzzle low as it growled a deep warning rumble that sifted through the onlookers' curiosity. Harvey's heart thumped, though his face remained a mask of calm. Here we go again, he thought, recalling endless nights in foreign jungles where threat could materialize from a rustle of underbrush. Now that same dread resurfaced under the branches of Redwood Grove Park. He inhaled slowly, pressing his hands flat against his thighs to still their tremor, determined not to give them any pretext. To the passing crowd, Harvey's uninterrupted vigil was suddenly suspicious, an elderly black veteran simply resting, now deemed a potential danger. Mothers clutched their children's hands tighter. Joggers veered off the trail. A group of teenagers froze mid-chatter. All watched as the officers formed a semicircle around him, eyes sharp, bodies poised for action. Shadow's hackles bristled. Its leash strains signaled a readiness to attack. Fletcher took the first step forward, voice measured but firm. "Sir, we've had reports of someone loitering here too long. You mind telling us your business?" Mercer shifted, his weight fingers grazing his holster. Grant eased the leash tighter, the dog's growl escalating to a snarl. Harvey met their gaze without flinching, every line in his weathered face telling stories of honor and sacrifice. He cleared his throat and began, voice low but unwavering. "I come here every day to remember to breathe, to be. I've done nothing wrong." Behind his calm words, however, his pulse raced with the knowledge that once more he would have to fight for the simple right to exist. Officer Mercer's tone hardened as he stepped closer. "You got ID on you," he snarled, eyes narrowing. Harvey Sinclair reached inside his bomber jacket with deliberate slowness, as if every move mattered. From a worn pocket, he produced a laminated card, and its corners frayed, United States Marine Corps Vietnam veteran. He held it level, the gold seal catching stray rays of the late sun. Fletcher glanced at the ID, then back at Harvey, offering nothing but polite silence. But Mercer's lips curled in doubt. "Could be fake," he scoffed. Leaning so close, the brim of his cap cast a shadow across Harvey's eyes. The dog shadow stiffened at Mercer's side ears, pricked forward, muscles coiled. Lawrence felt the surge of adrenaline in the younger officers. They'd found their proof of suspicion. A ripple of unease raced through the park. Joggers halted mid-stride. Mothers ushered children behind them. A group of teenagers raised their phone screens aimed at the unfolding confrontation. Harvey's chest tightened as he watched the crowd gather. Among the wary stares, he caught a few sympathetic glances, an older couple clutching each other's hands, as an artist with a sketch pad paused on the path. He felt the weight of their gaze and steeled himself. "I serve this country," he said softly but firmly, voice steady despite the sting in his throat. "I fought for people who wouldn't even look me in the eye. Now I'm just trying to sit in peace." His words drifted on the afternoon warmth, pressing into the officer's resolve. Mercer spat. "Let's see that ID closer." He snatched at Harvey's hand, but Fletcher held up a cautioning palm. Shadows snarled low and menacing, testing the taut leash again. The tension snapped taut as piano wire everyone held their breath, poised on the edge of what might come next. Harvey locked eyes with Mercer. "I've shown you who I am," he said unwavering. "But here I still have to prove I belong." At that moment, the park's hush became a spotlight on one man's quiet dignity and on the officers who questioned it. When Mercer barked, "Stand up now," and Grant yanked the leash taut, Shadow exploded forward, muscles coiling, then whipping toward Harvey like a dark bolt. In that heartbeat, the park's warm light shifted to cold alarm. Children froze mid-scream, joggers halted mid-stride, and even the breeze caught in its tracks. Harvey Sinclair didn't flinch. Instead, he lowered himself to one knee, slow, deliberate, as if reliving ambush drills from Vietnam. His old bones creaked under him, but his posture was unbroken, his gaze steady. Time stretched as the German shepherd bore down, jaws parted, eyes blazing. Then in a breath, Shadow skidded to a stop just feet away. The feral snarl slid from its muzzle like sand replaced by a low whine. Harvey extended a weathered hand palm up, and the dog, trained for violence, collapsed into his side, burying its head in the veteran's lap. Its hackles softened, tail-stilled eyes, closing in trust. For a moment, the world went rigid. Engines idled in the background, their drivers gawking. A mother's grip tightened on her child, then loosened as the child let go of her tears. Phones slipped from teenage hands. Mouths hung open. No one dared speak. The tension cracked like glass. Harvey stroked Shadow's neck, voice, a quiet echo. "Easy now, it's me." The dog trembled, then melted against him. Vulnerability laid bare. 3 officers stood frozen. Mercer's jaw slack, Fletcher's eyes wide, Grant's leash slackening in his grip. In that stunned silence, a single truth shone brighter than any badge a soldier's dignity can tame, even a beast bred for force. The bench where Harvey had once felt invisible was now a spotlight on a man and a dog who refused to be defined by suspicion. And in that hush, the entire park felt what had always been there: justice doesn't roar, it remembers. From the hushed crowd, a towering figure surged forward, Victor Sloan, medals glinting on his chest, the very man Harvey had carried to safety under fire and dang. His stride cleaved through onlookers, boots striking pavement like drumbeats of justice. When he confronted the 3 officers, his voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Release him now," time seemed to shudder. Fletcher's grip on his holster slackened. Mercer's scowl froze mid-twitch. Grant's leash slackened in his trembling hand. Victor's presence, battle-hardened, unyielding, transformed the park into a makeshift courtroom. Eyewitnesses step out back, phones rising to capture every second of this confrontation. "Do you understand what you're doing?" Victor demanded, his tone cold as steel. "You aimed a weaponized dog at a 72-year-old Marine veteran, and you call that procedure." The words reverberated off oak trunks and startled passersby. Snippets of the scene flashed in the gathering dusk. Shadow curled beside Harvey, the old warrior kneeling with unwavering dignity, and the 3 officers suddenly small under Victor's unflinching gaze. A murmur rippled through the crowd, first shock, then outrage. Phones recorded Fletcher's faltering apology attempt, Mercer's fumbling defense, Grant's silent shame. Victor didn't let them off easy. "Your job is to protect," he thundered, "not to terrorize the very citizens you're sworn to serve." In that raw moment, Redwood Grove Park morphed into a stage of reckoning. Spectators weren't mere bystanders. They became witnesses to an act of overt racism and abuse of power. Flashes of cameras lit up officers caught in the glare of accountability. Victor's powerful intervention underscored a deeper truth: when the system fails, it takes the bravery of individuals on and off the battlefield to demand justice. As echoes of Victor's rebuke faded into the evening air, the park no longer felt ordinary. It had become a crucible for change, a place where a single act of defiance might shatter the silence that had long protected prejudice. The three officers circled Harvey as if unsure what came next. Fletcher's voice trembled as he mumbled, We were wrong." Mercer shot a desperate glance at his partners and tried to cling to protocol. "We were just doing our job, following procedure." But Victor's rebuke rang out again, unwavering. That wasn't procedure, it was prejudice. Grant's eyes darted from Harvey to the dog at his side. Shadow, once coiled to attack, now stared at Harvey with quiet loyalty, ignoring every muzzle command. Grant's leash slackened in his hand as the confusion and shame broke across his face. The veneer of authority peeled away, revealing human uncertainty beneath the uniform. Around them, the crowd's fear hardened into fury. Voices rose in a chorus, "Justice, justice," echoing against the park's silent oaks. Phones buzzed as bystanders recorded every falter, every apology, every stuttering excuse. A wave of righteous anger swept through the onlookers, emboldening them to step forward to speak out. Harvey sat erect, shoulders still from years of holding steady under fire. Tears gleamed in his eyes as he absorbed the moment his calm endurance, his right to simply exist, finally met with acknowledgement. He nodded once slowly, a gesture of fragile triumph. In that nod lived decades of unspoken burdens, the traumas of Vietnam, the stares of suspicion at home, the countless times he'd been more shadow than man in his own land. Victor stood protectively beside Harvey, chest still heaving from the confrontation. He met Fletcher's gaze and spoke again, softer, but no less powerful. "You owe this man more than an apology. You owe him your integrity." Fletcher swallowed hard, his uniform suddenly too tight. Mercer's gaze fell to the grass, and Grant knelt to unclip Shadow as though releasing not just a dope, but 1,000 silent accusations. In that charged stillness, Redwood Grove Park shifted forever. Three officers who'd come to enforce control found themselves at the mercy of truth. Harvey Sinclair, the silent veteran, had become a symbol of resilience and justice. As the crowd's chant of justice swelled, one thing was clear: his voice and his dignity would never be ignored again. The image of the veteran kneeling in the park, steadfast as an old oak, exploded across social media overnight. Tagged simply "Veteran on Bench," the photo captured a moment of profound defiance, a Marine who lowered himself not in shame but to unmask a system's bias. News outlets pounced, airing slow-motion replays of Shadow's unexpected embrace and the officers' stunned reactions. Editorials ran side by side with call-in segments demanding answers from city officials and police leadership. Grassroots activists seized the symbol. Local chapters of the NAACP organized bench vigils, where citizens gathered to sit in silent solidarity on park benches around the city. A petition calling for mandatory body-worn cameras shot past 50,000 signatures within 24 hours. Lawmakers in Springfield held hearings on anti-bias training for recruit academies, while aldermen in Chicago proposed ordinances requiring civilian oversight boards to have real investigative power. Veterans groups issued statements of support, recalling their own struggles with post-war invisibility and institutional indifference. "He carried our burden on that bench," one retired sergeant wrote, and reminded us that respect isn't granted by a badge, it's earned by simple humanity. Faith leaders preached from pulpits about the moral imperative to see every person as a beloved child of God, not a statistic or a threat. Meanwhile, Veteran on Bench merchandise, lapel pins, t-shirts, bumper stickers took off, but Harvey himself demurred. He declined TV interviews, asking instead for funds to support legal aid for profiling victims and community centers that teach conflict de-escalation. His quiet leadership shaped the next phase, turning outrage into action. Across the State Department scrambled to review stop and frisk data. Some pledged personnel changes, others doubled down on defending the status quo, only to be met with sharper criticisms and further protests. The conversation had shifted. What began as a single tense encounter had ushered in a nationwide reckoning. And as the story of Veteran on Bench spread, one question echoed through every city council and dinner table discussion: how many more benches must hold silent witnesses before true justice takes its stand? By week's end, the mayor's office had convened a civilian police dialogue commission, citing the image of the elderly Marine kneeling beneath the oak canopy as undeniable proof that reforms could no longer wait. City Hall banners proclaimed "Dignity meets memory," and panels of civic leaders, chaplains, and retired officers took their seats alongside everyday citizens. Each cited the park incident as a turning point, proof that respect isn't automatic. It must be architected through policy training and genuine listening. Meanwhile, the Sit for Justice movement ignited. On a Saturday morning, hundreds converged on Redwood Grove Park, each person claiming their own bench, each silhouette a living tribute to the fallen veterans' quiet stand. At precisely noon, onlookers watched in solemn awe as the crowd dropped to one knee, heads bowed in respectful silence. "We kneel for peace, we kneel for change," read handmade placards swaying gently in the light breeze. Reporters clustered at the edges, capturing the unity of the moment, black coats next to brown-gray hair, next to young activists, no age line dividing them. Across the nation, social feeds flooded with photos of lone protesters replicating the bench vigil in their hometown parks, Portland, Atlanta, Detroit, each frame captioned, "When dignity meets memory." Clergy shared sermons about the power of silent witness, while university ethics classes debated how a single act of stillness could shatter a lifetime of prejudice. Legislators on both sides of the aisle referenced veteran on bench in speeches, calling for mandatory body cameras, transparent complaint processes, and community policing budgets. Yet the most profound shift wasn't in ordinances or press releases, it was in everyday conversations. Neighbors paused their morning walks to discuss equity. Families used dinner hours to unpack what it means to see your fellow human. And through it all, the park bench remained empty, a silent monument to memory integrity and the unspoken promise that dignity, once reclaimed, is never relinquished. 1 year on, the city enacted 24/7 body camera rules and stood up its long-promised Civilian Oversight Center. Hundreds of officers have now completed anti-bias training, and every allegation of racial profiling is handled in full view. Harvey Sinclair himself sits at the drafting table advising lawmakers, "Just take a seat, then they'll have to listen." Shadow, once a weapon, now stars as the gentle mascot for the Community Empathy Campaign, his likeness on posters and coffee mugs reminding everyone that dignity demands action. Across Chicago, Sit for Justice decals appear on park benches, and dawn vigils draw neighbors in quiet solidarity. In schools and churches, Harvey's story of stillness met with recognition becomes the lesson of the year. What began as a lone veteran under oaks has rippled through policy classrooms and city halls, proving that one calm act of resistance can reshape hearts, rewrite procedures, and rekindle trust, one silent bench at a time. Harvey's stand in Redwood Grove Park has graduated into textbooks at police academies and community history courses. Across the country, the Sitters Guild, made up of students, officers, and neighbors, gathers to retell the instant a K-9 defied its orders and recognized a veteran. Murals of Harvey kneeling beside Shadow now brighten walls from Seattle to Miami, celebrating the quiet power of dignity and loyalty. His legacy echoes in every memorial bench where people pause, and in every public forum where silence becomes a demand for truth. Above all, Harvey's story reminds us that justice can never be blind. History must never be erased, and every one of us has the right to sit down until those in power finally listen. This tale engraves the lesson that sometimes it is silence and restraint that wield a more profound influence on public opinion than any rallying cry. The message to every viewer, especially an older audience, is clear: do not overlook any sign of injustice, even if it is merely a suspicious glare or a baseless order. Now, I invite you to share your personal perspective. How did you feel witnessing the moment when the dig obeyed memory rather than command? Do you believe that a simple act like sitting down can dismantle deep-seated prejudice? Please comment with your prediction in your view. When will racism truly end? Will it be by 2030, 2040, or even 2050 before we break the cycle of bias? Each opinion you offer, each forecast you make, becomes a voice that fuels the nonviolent movement and sparks a dialogue that lasts for generations.